Okay, so starting here the fifth turn of the on the Central Powers on the German side. See a march forward. I think this is going to destroy this headquarters, which will be gone for 3 months then. That's the entirety of the French offensive ability in the south down there. And that's going to be real tough. Not that there's enough troops. They're going to pretty much be trying to hold the line at this point. But I'm looking at, hey, a German offensive down there looks like it might actually gain some ground. And if I can bulge things in here and bulge things down across here, basically I see two places of interest up in the north. Like I said, I'm trying to isolate the Belgians. I can deal with them with these units that I'm using now to destroy Namur. But I've got some problems. One is the British are at Mons, and that's going to be tough to crack. I mean, I'm not going to crack them, but I am going to try to push through here. I may make an attack on Mons. I'm not sure. I mean, the odds are approximately equal, right? 17 and 16 is in the 30s, and this is going to be 27. No, it's not gonna be much difference. The terrain, they're gonna get a benefit from terrain. It's probably not worth attacking under those circumstances, because there are a decent amount of English supply points. It's not like I can drain that. So my goal has to really be to push this way. But one of my goals is to prevent the British from pushing forward. So we're not going to see a bloody Mons because it's just not worth making attacks anywhere near, parity. That being 3-1, of course. It's not like I've got too many points, I think. If I do, I have to worry about it. I'm at 80. Maybe I do. 110. Oh, there's another 50. 160, another 50. Yeah, I've got to make attack. The Germans have to make some attacks in order to get themselves below that 200 by the end of the Schlieffen Plan era. You can't just slip through. But my goal is to try to crack here. I've got kind of a weak connection here that I wouldn't like, except the Belgians can't do much. I think they can attack it. If they want, they can. Main force is going to take Namur out. And I'm going to use artillery to start knocking out Liège. Got some rail conversions going on, slipping into Belgium here. I can't get past Liège right now. And I think I had some going on down here as well, maybe. I'm not sure. That's all Germany, so that seems unlikely. But I remember somewhere I converted a rail hex elsewhere. Alright, time to start rolling all the attacks that I want to make. Now remember, you don't have to make any, so this whole line I'm just not going to do. In fact, what I ought to be doing is at the end of the month, I'm going to start constructing trenches along there because I don't want to fight there. I think the French may fall back, though, to their fortress line. It's kind of foolish. Where they have strength, they might as well stay. Back here, they have to retreat to their fortress line. But they do need to pull some of this strength off and get it up north to hook up with the Brits, because otherwise there's a crack in the line here and I can start getting enough units on the Brits that bad things can happen. Okay, so that headquarters unit was wiped out and I advanced into the space. But here's the problem. They show up 3 full months. Well, 3 full months, August, 1, 2, 3, that's going to put me in November. Great. But it's in the same turn space. So what I had to do is dig out a little number counter to tell me which turn space to put it in. That may not be a problem for most people, but there's no easy way to track that. I guess you could put a slip of paper under it as well. A little bit of an annoyance, but usually big campaign games do have that kind of issue. Oh boy, a German attack here. And unfortunately I already took the German losses off. I'll have to replace that. They're going to take 2 less losses. Has actually exceeded the half strength points available. for the French. So it's going to force the French to retreat. So essentially they did enough damage that they did more than half the total strength points. There were 11 strength points here. They did 8 points of damage. So the French take a retreat result, an enforced retreat, which means they take a third less hit points of damage. I don't know how that's rounded. Round fractions to the nearest. That makes it easy. So I subtract 3. So they're only going to take 5 hits of damage instead of the 8 they were supposed to. They have to pull back. And it means that their counterattack, instead of being on the 11, it wouldn't have been anyway, instead of being on the 24 plus 6 is 30 table, is going to be on a lesser table because it's only the 22 table. That's going to cause 2 less losses than I recorded. Anyway, I'll do the bookkeeping there and pull the unit back, and that allows the Germans to advance into a hex. That's the first time we've really seen that, where forces that are actually, a significant defense took half their losses and had to retreat. That's going to change once the entrenchments start going into place, though. Germans punched through at another hex here. There was French artillery there, which can't take the losses early. The infantry has to take the losses first. A retreat was required. The artillery is just destroyed. It's worth 2 demoralization points per strength point of it. So that actually worked out to be a very good attack, hitting where there's artillery. It did remind me, though, as I was looking up, gee, cavalry pay more. And I had to change some of my demoralization points to reflect the extra lost cav that I had taken. Alright, well, I've punched a couple little holes through. Oh, shit. Is that where I attacked? Yeah, I don't seem to have crossed this river. I left a no man's land here. I made the attacks up in the north here. Alright, well, let's see what we can do against the Brits and against this kind of weaker French stuff too. And I was able to do this safe thing, an artillery only attack on Liège. Since it was only the fortification there, it can't fire back even. That seems a little weird to me because I would think the fortification includes some heavy artillery. But the way it's written here, when only artillery are involved in attack, they may be only counterattacked by defending artillery units. That doesn't seem to include fortifications. So they were able to demolish it from long range at no risk whatsoever, which is kind of cool. That's the end of our German phase. They punched through the fort here. I kind of should have done that as a mobile column attack, because if I had set it up right, I could have followed up with an attack down here, I think, had I done that. But I didn't really set up the numbers for it. I'm kind of waiting for this big stack to come into play. Namur has not fallen, of course. It's slowly been cut in half. Against the Brits here, kind of ran into this wall. It didn't, slightly more losses for the attacker, but not too bad. The reason I went for this one rather than the weaker infantry over here that I might have been able to get to retreat easier was I was a little out of range of my supply wagon here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Which would have reduced the strength points for my attack. I could throw in these units over to the side, so I went for that instead. Overall, not a lot of movement. There's not going to be. I mean, this is World War I. Yes, it's the early part, the Schlieffen Plan. We're going to see this slide through, but it's only because there's this huge gap here. The game does not really allow for these broad sweeping movements once the fronts are developed. You're not going to get these breakthroughs, I don't think. Although the rules do try to give some rights to it, and when we see the assault troops, we'll see if that gets better. The rules do give some chance of it. By using the column assaults, you can break a hole in and then march through that and make attacks. So there is some breakthrough capability in this, but once the trenches are in place, it's almost impossible to budge things. I hope. It looks very likely. I mean, it's tough to budge things here. You have to basically wipe them out to get them with the trenches. Alright, well, we'll slide this. I don't think I'm set up for any recombinations. I might have one down there. I'll do it if I do. And then we'll flip over to the Entente. Okay, so we enter the Allied turn here, and everything's pretty much released at this point. Well, everything is released at this point. In addition, there's some reinforcements. I noticed something interesting in the reinforcement rules. They've been giving a hex number so far for the early reinforcements, but as things get later, and for the British, for example, there is no hex number indicated in the rule book. So what the rules do specify where they end up. It's just not right in, on that list of entries, and it makes sense. It's just it was a little something to have to go look for. So for the French, I think it ends up in any city. Germans, same thing, home city. But for the English, it has to end up at a controlled port, which would be this. And I wonder what those numbers are on the ports. Those I don't think are explained anywhere. Very interesting. At least not that I know of. Presumably part of the campaign. I don't know. Anyway, we'll get these guys moving. Okay, no counterattacks here. Or no attacks. The French have pulled down here in the south and kind of built some sort of line into place to defend against the Germans. They've still got a strong force here. They pulled back a little bit. You can see some sort of no man's land type territories opening up there. To take advantage of the river line, they're hoping that this can't be punctured. If it can be punctured, if the line can be damaged, that puts them in a lot more difficulty. So for example, these little areas here, the reason they're still there is they have fortifications lines along there. And I don't want to give up a fortification line at all. But on the other hand, the river line is perhaps as valuable. So I may retreat from those fortifications when attacked and reduce my counterattack efficacy, but also really force the Germans to actually push forward and take things on. This is a very thin line here, British and French combined in there. I've got to look at the front definitions. I think eventually I can't maintain this kind of mixed in force together here. I think the segments of the front have to be defined by nationality eventually. But as of right now, I don't believe I'm in the mid or late war area, which is where that takes place. The French do not have to counterattack. I moved some supply points around, 10 points to the 3rd Division or 3rd Army from the 5th. We've got, 28, 40, 51, 64, some 81 points of supply. So I'm under no obligation to get that number down the way the Germans are. The Germans actually have to make some attacks. They certainly want to. They want to try to break this. That's where the weak point is. But they may want to make more attacks as well, just to keep themselves under 200. They're not under that yet. And they've got quite a ways to go with their points. So it was brought up that I shouldn't have launched an all-out assault on Liège. One of the reasons I did, I'm told that's going to cause real problems, the number of troops, I guess, that I lost there, because certainly supply points are not something I'm worried about. We'll see how it works. If I am having trouble keeping the German supply points under 200, it may be because I don't have enough troops that have good attacks over here, and then I have to make some attacks where I wouldn't necessarily want to. Although I had a desire to make attacks down here in the south, it looks like the French have filled that in to some extent. There are still weak spots on that line, and I think I can push some ground, but there's not too much value to attacking there. My goal is Paris. Interestingly enough, looking at the so that's why I ran through there. And I was worried I was going too slow. And I'm still going to play as though the Schlieffen plan is in existence, which is I got to break through and I got to make it to Paris. And at some point I may modify that. Maybe happening next turn when those troops are going east. But, maybe try to do an outflank or something along those lines just to gain ground. But right now, I still see it as a possibility, and I want to rush and hit as hard as I can to try to get there. But here's what's interesting. The Grand Campaign, the full war scenario, doesn't take into account the possibility of Paris falling. I don't know what's going to happen if I do get Paris, because that would be a major, major blow to France. And I don't think it's well defined in the game. In the Schlieffen Plan itself, that's victory, right? You win the game if you take Paris here. I think. France and Great, no, it's demoralization point. You don't, but it's plus 4 levels of victory adjustment for taking it, which means France probably, it's the thought here is that France probably would surrender if Paris fell. Would it, wouldn't it? I don't know. Would there be enough points accumulated by that overreach to get Paris to make up for the fact that the Germans are going to be in that place? Not according to the base rules. So if you're playing the base game, you almost have to discard the Schlieffen Plan right from the very start, because there's a lot of stuff here that you'd be conquering that's not worth anything. Certainly, Lille is going to do some damage to the French. But once you get past Lille, there's not much in terms of valuable territory here. There's some fortresses, but you're probably bypassing these in order to move quickly. And you're really going to be exposing your forces. That's still my goal. Because I don't want to break with that if I think it can happen. So I got to kind of try to balance that in the way I'm playing, because I don't want to discard the Schlieffen Plan unless it is, as historically, something that had to be abandoned because it was impossible at that point.